Community Partners Interview, where we explore the organizations, opportunities, and resources that look to make change in our daily lives. I'm your host, Davy Au, and you're listening to Voices for Ability Radio. All abilities, all the time. Today, I'm joined by Anne Borden King, the co-founder of Autistics for Autistics Self-Advocacy in Canada, also known as A4A. A4A is an international affiliate of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. Locally, A4A is a collective of autistic adults engaged in community education, events, activism, and advocating for reform to Canadian autism policies. They're self-advocates, meaning they're neither our parents nor service providers, but rather advocates for us. We are proudly autistic and united in supporting all autistics in the province on the issues that impact our community. A4A was formed in 2017 by autistic activists in Ontario, and again, they are an international affiliate of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network and member of the Autistic Advocates Coalition of Canada. In addition to their chapter in Ontario, they have a new chapter in New Brunswick and one soon to launch in Alberta. Thanks for joining us today, Anne.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you. Now, to begin, why don't you tell us and our listeners a little bit more about yourself and what inspired you to work with A4A and with individuals with disabilities as a whole?
Oh, yes. So it was around 2016, and there was a Facebook group called Autistics in Canada that a lot of us were in this Facebook group where we would just talk about our daily lives and maybe issues to do with work or looking for work or trying to understand the world that isn't quite made for us and just chilling. And that was a little like social group. And myself and a couple of other people had been watching in the United States another group called the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network that were doing really amazing advocacy and work and really able to change the things that we had been talking about, our own challenges. And we didn't feel like there was any group, we knew there wasn't any group like it in Canada. The only groups representing autism were, often run by like people providing autism services. They weren't run by actually autistic people. So we decided that we wanted to become an international affiliate of the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network. And luckily, when you're an international affiliate of ASAN, you really can tailor your work to the country or place where you are located. So we made ourselves a website. We had founding meetings and we got everything set up for that. And we decided, like we talked about, to focus on advocacy, education, and community building as our three goals. And since 2017, we've been able to really achieve a lot in terms of advocacy, affecting law, affecting education, affecting access, and also especially educating within different communities. So it's been very rewarding since we founded.
And as I'm sure it would be. That is an absolutely incredible story. Now, and I must say, too, that while preparing for this interview, I honestly was just floored by the amount of what I found. Floored in a good way, of course. On the one hand, again, in preparing for this interview, I looked over your website, did a little extra research on that end, and I noticed that you had a bunch of seminars and resources available. On the one hand, I'm sure our listeners would too, but do you think that you could tell us a little bit about what those seminars and resources you offer are like? But on the other hand, too, do you think you could also tell us a bit about that about the blog that you also have as well?
Yes. So our resources, some of the resource work that we do, for example, we have one project called the Autistic Health Access Project. And this is a project that I actually lead this project with Darla Burrow. And Darla is a non-speaking person. Darla uses text to speak. So she types something in and then it comes out in a voice. What we know is that a lot of doctors and hospitals and clinics, especially emergency rooms, they've never learned anything about communicating with a person who uses AAC, which is, this thing that people use that don't speak. So we do seminars for medical students and clinics, anyone who wants in the medical professions who wants to learn the basics of how to communicate with a patient who uses AAC and the basics of communicating in general with autistic patients and how to make their spaces, whether it's an emergency room or a clinic, more accessible, because we know there's barriers to our healthcare. People often don't seek care if they feel like they're not going to be able to have their basic communication or access needs met. So it's a healthcare concern for us. And what I find when I lead these seminars, co-lead these seminars with different medical associations and things like that, is that they're really, really happy to speak with us, and they really want to learn. Learning how to communicate with someone who uses AAC, or learning some of the other basics we teach them, it really doesn't take long to learn it. It's just that if they're never exposed to it, they don't know how. So this simple act of just having a seminar for an hour or a couple of hours, or sending resources to people, whether it's a hospital, a school, or a community group, or we do a lot of them for employers as well. All of this education and information is wanted. And we're one of the only organizations in Canada providing it right now. So it's very, very rewarding and important work, I think.
Absolutely, as I'm sure it would be. Now, to that end, I also noticed that under some of these resources, you also have what's it called? Something called the Self-Advocacy and Neurodiversity Movement. Do you think that you could give us a little insight as to what that's all about as well?
Yes. So we like to try to empower other organizations because, I mean, a lot of the reason that we're doing this work, I'll speak for myself personally. We don't have like an operating budget or anything. Like most of the time, we might get a little stipend if we give a seminar, right? I'm sorry about that sound. We might get a little stipend if we lead a seminar, but we don't have operating funds. So we're not doing this work for our salary. Everyone who is doing this work in our organization is doing it because they want to help. And the best way that we can really help is to empower other people to do what we're doing. So, for example, we do a flag raising at Toronto City Hall. We have the neurodiversity flag, which is it's a big flag that has a symbol on it. It's kind of like an infinity symbol in the colors of a rainbow. And we raise that. And we have a get together where people can hang out and just have fun and get to know each other. And then the flag flies all day in the city, and we have a bit of a proclamation feel about it, so that it's kind of understood, hey, we're part of the city, and look, even our flag can fly at City Hall for a day. We have a guide, and I think this might be part of what you're referring to on our website. We'd like other people to start doing this too. I know there's someone that does it out in Nova Scotia, Alex Kronstein, getting people across Canada to do these little flag raisings, because it's a really wonderful moment, and it's a moment to really talk about inclusion in our cities. But how do you do it? It's complicated. You have to get a permit. You have to know who to call and how to call. And so what we put together is a little guide. Wherever you live in Canada, here's how you can do this cool event, so that we're passing our knowledge along, so that the great work that we're doing can be done in other places as well.
Well, and that's great to know. And on the note of events, other than those flag raisings, are there any other events coming up for A4A, either that you're hosting or taking part in?
Yeah, so we just had recently the Disability Day of Mourning, which is an event that we do every year. It's an international event, and we're the host of it in Canada. And the Disability Day of Mourning is a day where we say the names and remember the names of disabled people who were murdered by their parents or caregivers. And we raise awareness of the fact that their lives had value, and just like anyone else, because often the people that killed them will get lighter sentences just because the person they killed was disabled. I mean, it's very terrible. So it's a consciousness raising thing. And it's also a way to remember these people. So we lead that every year. That just wrapped up. That was in early March. And we have the flag raising every year. And then we lead seminars throughout the year to anyone who's interested. And if you are interested in having us come and talk about workplace accessibility or accessibility anywhere, you can go to our website, a4aontario.com. But the other thing that we do is we do social things. So we have online hangouts. We have a Discord group for autistic people, and we have a Facebook group for autistic people. Through those groups, we organize online hangouts and sometimes also in-person hangouts, where everyone can just kind of get together and like have a great time and be autistic all together. Anyone who's interested in these hangouts will need to join one of our online groups, obviously, and they can email us and we'll send them an invite to our online group, either a Discord or Facebook. You can email us at Ontario@gmail.com. That's A4AOntario@gmail.com.
That'll be good. That'll be good. That'll be really good to know, I'm sure. And we can always go over that again closer to the end as we run out of time. But while we still have the time, other than events, from what I've seen, A4A It's also has a blog. Do you think that and I know I mentioned this earlier, and I apologize for having done so a little bit too quickly, but do you think that you could tell us a little bit about said blog as well?
Yes. So on our blog, we do have a lot of information about what we're working on. We put out an annual report and we talk about all of our different events and activities. And occasionally we will also have someone write an opinion editorial. So if something's happening in Canada, for example, if there is legislation coming up to ban seclusion rooms in special education classrooms, or some kind of a human rights issue that's happened, that maybe there's a good law coming out, maybe there's bad law that's coming out, maybe there's a movement to try to improve the law, anything to do with advocacy, petitions, anything like that, we would generally put on our blog or also on our social media Facebook page as well, so that people can get involved and learn about the various issues that are happening in Canada, so that we can start to improve not only access, but also human rights, because we're an organization that doesn't just represent us autistic adults. We realize that we also have to represent autistic children, because nobody else is, and children can't represent themselves. So we are very focused as well on children's rights and making sure that kids have access to AAC in school if they're non-speaking, making sure that special education classrooms, the environment there is improved, and that there's better regulation and oversight of those spaces. And also just raising autistic pride, which is, I guess, the part I haven't talked about enough since it's Autism Awareness Month, but getting people together and saying, there's really a lot of hope for the future. There's really a lot going on. There are a lot of great ways to educate people, and there's a lot of change happening too that is making things better for us, and we can be part of that change, and we can be part of pushing that change along to make it happen faster.
Fair enough. And now you mentioned something about seclusion rooms. Now, do you think that you could tell us tell us a little bit about the ban of seclusion rooms in Canadian schools and what that's all about?
Yeah. So right now we're in a difficult situation. Seclusion rooms at schools are basically rooms that it's usually kids that are in special education classrooms, and teachers will lock them in a room. It doesn't happen in every district or every school, but it happens in a lot of them. And it happens a lot in Canada. In the United States, there's a really great organization called the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. And interestingly, they were founded by parents, and they're really in tune with this problem, because it's parents whose kids had been put into seclusion rooms, which is obviously, traumatic and a violation of their human rights and dangerous. So the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint has recently launched a Canadian chapter, and the Canadian chapter we are aligned very closely with. We were involved with the founding, and they're working very hard to get seclusion rooms banned. I know that there's a very serious conversation happening in New Brunswick right now that's leading towards a ban on seclusion rooms. There was almost a ban on seclusion rooms in Ontario, but unfortunately, the member of parliament who had introduced the bill left parliament, so that has to be revived. And then basically, we need to go province by province, not only getting these rooms banned, but also providing the education for educators into, number one, why they should not be doing anything like that, and number two, what they can do instead, so that they understand. Some people call it de-escalation. I prefer to call it co-regulation, so that they understand how to deal with students in their classroom in a way that's not punitive and harmful to them. So this is a huge part of the education. A lot of people that work in special education classrooms just don't know any other way to do things, and unfortunately, we're never taught that. So it's really up to our groups like ours, groups like the Alliance, to provide that education. But we also have to have the legislation part of it, which is to put a ban on them. It's completely unacceptable that anyone is doing this. And it's actually incredibly common. So that's an issue for us, obviously. And we're really optimistic, especially with the Alliance Against Seclusion and Restraint. They've been very effective in the United States. And our hope is that within just a couple of years, they'll be banned in every province.
Well, and that's an absolutely amazing thing. That's absolutely amazing thing to know. And to that end, thank you for the effort that you and A4A have been putting into that on that front. And from there, there's so many other things that I could even ask. Though on a bit of a lighter note, other than the ban of seclusion rooms, of which I know that you and A4A, having been told now, are fighting very passionately against. You also have something called, I've noticed, the Autistic Health Access Project. Do you think that you could give us a little insight about what that is as well?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like I was referencing it a little bit earlier. It's about making sure that we can get to the doctor and the dentist, because a lot of people, autistic people and anyone with intellectual disabilities as well, it applies to them too, and people with other disabilities, it also applies to. Going to the dentist was not great for a lot of people. There was even something, a form of binding where they would like tie the kids up. I think this was in the 80s and 90s. Today, the restraint tends to be more what they would call chemical restraint, where they just drug you out to do your work, the work on you as a child. But a lot of there's a lot of trauma associated with going to the dentist for a lot of autistic people and people with intellectual disabilities. So when you get to be an adult, you kind of don't want to go to the dentist. I mean, you really don't want to go to the dentist. So how can we create what we call trauma-informed dentistry? Dentists who understand that someone coming in might have had some really bad experiences, number one, and get them to come back, be gentle, ask for consent. Things you don't think of when you go to the dentist. They often, just kind of go in there and hammer away. But I know trauma-informed dentists, and they can see anybody, and calmly get them through the whole thing without chemical restraint, without any kind of restraint, without any kind of trauma. We want to see more of that. It's taking off. I didn't come up with the term trauma-informed dentistry. This is something people are doing. This is something we really want to encourage. We want to encourage trauma-informed care in all forms of medicine. It's a very simple thing to do. It may sound like it's a whole bunch of work. It's really not. It's really just about checking in with people and understanding some basic strategies. If we can have emergency rooms that have, I know they see physical trauma, but I'm talking about people coming in with baggage, right? If they can see someone who is really struggling, even just from a sensory perspective, not a trauma perspective, from a sensory perspective, it's really hard being in the emergency room. If you're autistic, everything's brighter, louder, and more confusing. And you've probably just had an accident or you're really sick. All of that combined can lead to an autistic person having a meltdown or shutting down and not being able to talk. So if people that work in emergency rooms understand, first of all, have pen and paper nearby. If somebody is stressed and they can't speak, you can give them a pen and paper. Have that around. If someone comes in using an AAC device because they don't speak, understand how to talk to somebody who's using an AAC device and never take their AAC device away, because that has happened. So these things are all just can make things more simple. If you have someone who's autistic, who's pacing, you can recognize, okay, they need to walk back and forth to regulate their body because they're overwhelmed. I'm going to let them walk back and forth, unless they broke their leg, right? I'm going to let them walk back and forth or move their arms or flap their hands. And I understand it's because they're autistic. I'm not going to misinterpret that as they're being aggressive to me or they're on drugs or things like that. Just having the basic understanding of how we move and how we communicate, which can be taught literally in an hour to anyone in an ER. And the techniques take 5 minutes. It's not a big commitment. The problem is just getting the information out there to them. Once we do that, then autistic people will be able to be more comfortable in emergency room situations. They'll go to the doctor more often when they need to so that they can get the healthcare they need, and they'll have an easier time getting to the dentist. All of these things are slowly happening, and our Autistic Health Access project is part of that change, and I'm super, super proud of it. So thanks for asking about it.
Absolutely. And this, I will say, coming from a bit of a research background myself, I was taught about using a trauma-informed approach to just about everything that I do, even my own creative works. But trauma-informed dentistry, now this is something new. Thank you for bringing that up to my attention. That's honestly that is absolutely amazing to know that there's actually something like that out there.
I wrote an article about it. If you Google my name, Anne Borden King, and then trauma-informed dentistry, I wrote an article in Healthy Debate about it. I interviewed a trauma-informed dentist, and it's very, very interesting.
Trauma-informed dentistry and an article under your name. All right, I'll be sure to keep that in mind, and I'm thinking our listeners will too. Now, on another hand, as we move forward, in terms of in terms of A4A as an organization, this next bit might have to be a bit of a larger question, so I apologize. But if someone wanted to become a member or volunteer with A4A, what's the process like? And are there any restrictions?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So that's a really good question. First of all, a lot of our members are autistic adults. Obviously, the community building and social aspect of it is largely autistic adults. However, in terms of education and advocacy, we also have many parents who are not autistic who work and help with us. And we have some parents who are autistic. So there really is not much of a limit on, it's not like you have to be autistic to volunteer with our organization. Obviously, we have a few restrictions in terms of we are not here to promote somebody's therapy practice. So sometimes people try to get in touch with us and they really just want to use us to promote their therapy practice. And we don't do that. And obviously, anyone who looks at our website and our work knows that we are opposed to ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis. So we're not going to get involved with any partner that uses ABA at all. So organizationally, there are obviously restrictions on who we partner with, but in terms of individuals, we're not just limited to autistic people. We're really happy to have families being involved. A lot of the work being done on school seclusion is being done by parents. And so what I would say is if somebody wants to, there's two ways to contact us. If you want to volunteer with our advocacy and education efforts, then you should send us an email. And we use the number 4 in the middle of our name. So it's A4AOntario@gmail.com. So any parent or anyone who wants to check in with us and see what's up. Sometimes we can also direct parents to other local advocacy organizations as well. And then the other way that autistic people would want to get in touch with us probably is through our Discord server. Our Discord server is only for autistic people. It's a kind of a one space where we just want to be our autistic selves and just talk about our autistic stuff. But we also do a lot of advocacy and planning there. So anyone who wants to join that would simply email us as well at a4aontario@gmail.com, and we can let you onto the Discord. If you don't use Discord, we also have we have a public page and a chat page on Facebook, and those are open to autistic people and allies of autistic people. So you don't have to be autistic to be in those groups, and there's more of a conversation happening there beyond our autistic world on our Discord.
Of course, and we can definitely circle back to that closer to the end again. Now, but for now, what if I'm without naming any names or getting too specific, are there any sort of success stories that you could share with us today? Perhaps about maybe someone who came through A4A's doors and where they ended up now, or what supports were put in place for a person? Anything of that nature?
Yeah, we do have success. We have one of our big successes was fairly early on in 2019. We were part of the efforts to change the autism funding model in Ontario. So prior to that, only ABA was funded for families. It was the only kind of therapy families could get like funding for from the province. And we obviously opposed that, and we met with the province. And in the end, they opened up therapy funding, as I mentioned at the beginning. Now, autism therapy in Ontario is for AAC device, for occupational therapy, for speech language therapy, school readiness therapy. There's therapy dog legislation. All of that comes from the province consulting with groups like ours who said, you have to broaden this out. You can't be doing this one therapy that it doesn't work and it's harmful. You need to be able to give parents and families and kids other options. So we're really proud of that. On an individual level, a lot of people have emailed us with access issues, and we can do two things. We write access letters. We can do a call with the employer or the school, and we can also refer them to let people know about their legal options as well as any local advocacy options. If let's say they're in rural Ontario or something like that, we would connect them with someone more local. So individually, we've had a lot of success. A lot of times whether it's a school or an employer or anyone else, not every time, but a lot of times, if you give them the education and the tools that they need, they will do better. We just need to get those tools and education out to these various institutions and individuals so that they can make their spaces more safe and accessible.
Of course, of course. Now, if I must say, we are running a little bit pressed for time right now. So this next question, this next question, I think. Hopefully we can get to the even more of the meat and potatoes beyond the issues that we've already talked about today, which were absolutely phenomenal, by the way. Though, in your opinion, what's one thing that you see happening repeatedly to individuals with disabilities that shouldn't be, and how do we collectively go about stopping it?
Oh, I would say, just off the top of my head, able-splaining. That is where a non-disabled person tries to explain to a disabled person what their disability is like. So if you say you need an accommodation, then they'll push back and question it. With autism, it happens a lot because autism is really a descriptive diagnosis. And so people think they understand it, but they don't really understand it. And they really just need to take a breath and listen. And being talked over, having so-called experts tell us that they understand autism because they wrote some papers. No, autistic people are the experts on autism. Just like anyone with any disability, you're an expert on your disability. And it's these voices of actually disabled people. People need to be a little more humble and a little more quiet and listen to us when we explain from an advocacy perspective. That's my number one thing, probably.
Of course. And able-splaining. So basically almost and pardon me for saying, it's almost like mansplaining, but on an ableist perspective. Wow.
Yeah, maybe they got that from that. Yeah.
And if I may, do you possibly have an article on able-splaining as well?
I can probably find one. I've heard it, at least colloquially, within our community. It happens a lot. I mean, there are a lot of people making a lot of money doing autism research that actually don't understand anything about autism. It's remarkable. And there's people making policies and there's people running autism charities. They don't get it. So that's why we're here.
Well, and to that, I'd say that we are so glad you are. Now, that being said, you have mentioned it before. You have mentioned it many a time in our conversation today. On the one hand, there's a Discord server. There's a Discord server, and the organization A4A has a Discord server. But on the other hand, you also have a public Facebook page and also a chat thread too. And on the other hand, A4A at Ontario. A4A Ontario at gmail.com. Besides that, are there any other ways that our listeners can reach out to you, can find you if they are looking for more information other than the Gmail, the Discord, and the Facebook, and the website?
Yeah, I would say this. I just wrote a book. It just came out this week. I've written a couple of ebooks, and they're very informative. And they're cheap. They're just a few bucks. And one of them is about the history and legacy of ABA, the problematic history and legacy of ABA. The other one just came out a couple days ago, and it's about autism research, problems in autism research, and also the movement to make autism research really more ethical and better. And so anyone who is maybe writing a paper or interested from a personal perspective, these are very deep dives, autistic info dump kind of dives into these two topics. They can look at the book on booksbyanneking.com. And you'll see in these books as well, especially in the ABA book, I have a whole chapter about A4A's work, which and how the sort of changing landscape of advocacy to be more inclusive of actually autistic groups.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again so much, Anne, for being here today and talking with us.
Thanks a lot. We're looking forward to people reaching out, and I really appreciate your network. I just noticed it's V4A talking to A4A.
Amazing alliteration somehow. We couldn't have imagined it even if we wanted it to. But that being said, we've reached the end of yet another amazing interview segment. You're listening to Community Partners presented by Voices for Ability Radio. All abilities, all the time. I'm your host, Davy Au. Be safe, be kind, and I'll see you all next time.